Well, very good morning to you. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has revamped his shadow cabinet following the disappointing local election results. He's wielded the axe, leading one former shadow chancellor, John McDonnell, to say some of his decisions are inept in the extreme. Well, let's have a look at some of the details. And the biggest casualty is Annalise Dodds, who's sacked as shadow chancellor to become Labour Party chair. Rachel Reeves is promoted to Shadow Chancellor from the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Deputy Leader Angela Rayner, who was sacked as Labour Party Chair, has been appointed the new Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, shadowing Michael Gove. Shabana Mahmood replaces Angela Rayner as National Campaign Coordinator. Nick Brown, who was the Chief Whip, has been replaced by Alan Campbell. Wes Streeting has been promoted to a new brief, Shadow Child Poverty Secretary. Another sacking is Valerie Vaz, who's been removed as Shadow Leader of the House of Commons to be replaced by Tangam Debonair. And rumours about two of Labour's highest profile members have been scotched. Lisa Nandy remains as Shadow Foreign Secretary and Jonathan Ashworth stays as Shadow Health Secretary. Sky News spoke to former Labour voters in Alfreton in Derbyshire to get their views of Sir Keir's leadership.
Keir Starmer was more interested in Boris Johnson's wallpaper than real things that are happening in the world. And that's my honest opinion.
Labour has lost it for the working class, and there was always for the working class people, wasn't they? Well, I think they've really lost it.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Joe Pike. I mean, it does seem to be a messy reshuffle.
Yes, certainly. And the last few days have been very difficult for Keir Starmer, not just some pretty disappointing election results, including the by-election in Hartlepool, but also over the last couple of days we have had this briefing war between various members of the Labour top team around, in particular, Angela Rayner's position. This is limited and not as far as perhaps Keir Starmer wanted to go, because I think he has been weakened in past days. The key change is around the new Shadow Chancellor. Rachel Reeves is seen as to the right of the party, therefore someone on the left, those around Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, may be suspicious of. But one person on the left I've spoken to in the last few minutes is actually Rachel Reeves, whatever her politics, has been one of the most effective Shadow Cabinet members, the only effective Shadow Cabinet member, this person said, in the last few months. We'll see what she has to do in the coming weeks. OK, Joe, thank you. Well, all of this comes as the Prime Minister announced that the roadmap out of lockdown would be proceeding as planned, with the next easing of restrictions, including the reopening of indoor hospitality, coming a week today. Well, let's talk to Nadine Dorris, who's the Minister for Mental Health. Good to see you this morning. So you are confident, are you, that there's not going to be any last-minute hitches in the coming week?
Well, the Prime Minister will be making an announcement later this afternoon, and he will be detailing how we're going to unlock and when. But we're on the roadmap. We're still very cautious. We are concerned that that we don't really ease restrictions too quickly, and that we do this in the way which is planned moving forward. But the Prime Minister will be making an announcement today, so we'll find out then.
Well, Michael Gove said that hugs will be allowed from a week today. I mean, how important is that as a move to be able to get physical contact?
Oh, I think it's massively important to everyone. I think it's what most people have missed, that intimate contact with family and friends, and entertaining, having people in your own house, meeting outdoors. I think they've been the most important. You know, isolation, in terms of my own profile on mental health, we've been really concerned about, people being isolated, not having that usual contact with friends and family. So it's massively important. We can't underestimate how important it is.
But are there going to be problems here in terms of are there going to be different rules for different ages? I mean, obviously, a lot of people under 40 just haven't been vaccinated at this stage. Are they going to have to follow different rules when it comes to social contact and physical contact?
Well, I'll refer you again, I'm sorry, to this afternoon when the Prime Minister will be holding a press conference and making an announcement with regard to the next steps of easing. But we do have to be cautious. The last thing anybody wants is to ever be in a position that we've been in over the last year. But we are determined to beat this virus. And the way we can beat it is by all of us doing what we've all done so far, which is working together to do what we've done over the last year. But also, we're looking forward, and the Prime Minister will be making an announcement. It does look as though the roadmap is on course, but we do so with caution, with ensuring that the data is in place, and with and looking forward to, and with excitement to the fact that we'll be able to hug our family and friends soon. So, caution balanced with optimism, I think, is the way forward.
But in terms of looking at that caution then, I mean, you've clearly got to anticipate at least the possibility that losing that social distancing between some people has the potential to create a spike in cases.
So there are variants of concern in the UK, which is the reason why we are still on the roadmap, and we're still ensuring that we measure the data between each phase of easement of lockdown. So, so you're quite right. It's something we need to be really careful about. It's why we haven't just opened up. But, we will open up as from next week. Pubs will be open, and restaurants and hospitality, and people will be able to meet up to 6 people indoors in their own homes. And then we will see how that's played out and what impact that has on the data and on the figures. And if that's okay, then, the roadmap is there. It's all set out. You have the details. But the Prime Minister will be making an announcement this afternoon, and I would urge everybody to watch that announcement. But it is very important that everyone still plays their part, and whatever is announced this afternoon, that we all do our bit to ensure that we absolutely nail this virus, and that we are never in the position, again, that we have been in over the last year. And we can only do that by following the rules, by playing our part, and by doing our bit to ensure that we beat it and we move out of it, as we are doing as one of the most successful countries in the world. We're leading the world in terms of COVID recovery. And it's important we keep following the plan that we have been doing to continue on that trajectory.
Is there a real danger that could be jeopardised by, the reopening of travel obviously brings the possibility of sort of new variants entering the UK. Are you comfortable with what has been announced so far on that?
Well, we're in a really good position. I actually saw you a few weeks ago when you were talking about travel being eased and, Spain and wanting to get to Spain. And, we all feel that. We all want to go back on our summer holidays, and people want to travel and see family abroad and go on holidays abroad. But again, we're in a position where we're much better off than we were a year ago. We have surge testing. We have bilateral twice a week testing, lateral flow testing that everybody can access now. We can spot.
In terms of that, forgive me for interrupting, but in terms of that lateral flow testing, can you confirm whether or not lateral flow testing, the free testing, will be available for people returning from holidays to prove that they're COVID negative? Is that going to be an option rather than the hundreds of pounds it would otherwise cost people?
I can't, and I will refer you to the press conference this afternoon, which the Prime Minister will be leading. So I can't confirm that, no. But what I can confirm is that easement of travel is about ensuring that we keep variants of concern under control, that we can surge test door to door where we need to, where we see those variants crop up, and it's about keeping people safe. Absolutely nailing this virus, making sure that as a country we can move out cautiously and carefully so that we never end up where we've been again.
In terms of moving the country forward, there are lots of issues which obviously have been pushed to the sidelines because of COVID, and understandably so. I know you're looking at announcing more mental health funding for young people in schools at the moment, but there's a huge question still remaining around social care in the UK, and announcements that are now way overdue into how we begin to deal with that.
Well, thank you for mentioning mental health. And we are making an announcement today, £17 million going into schools to help children, to help to fund training and support for children, to fund mental health leads in school. And that's on top of the £2.3 billion a year we invest in mental health and the £500 million that was secured during the spending review. So thank you for mentioning that, because children have suffered as a result of lockdown. It's really important that they have all the support that they need in schools continuing. We put £8 million in September. We've continued that funding to ensure that we can spot early any signs of mental health problems or issues that children have suffered as a result of isolation and lack of access to education.
Minister, it's good to talk to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Jerusalem has experienced a third night of tensions with Israeli police rolling out water cannon on some Palestinian protesters. Let's take you straight to our correspondent, Mark Stone. What's happening at the moment, Mark?
Well, you spoke to us an hour ago and things were calm. They have turned very, very quickly. A very violent series of confrontations here on the just outside the Al-Aqsa compound area, the area of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Let's move down here and we can show you the situation here. The Israeli police are arresting people as they try to clear an area where the Palestinians were praying for their morning prayer at the end of the daily Ramadan fast. We've seen stun grenades being thrown. We've seen tear gas being fired, and I could just see the water cannon just through there as you look out towards the Mount of Olives there from the Lion's Gate here in the Old City. The water cannon getting prepared. That's a water cannon which fires what's known as skunk, which is a rancid liquid that takes days to we'll just move over here. That takes days to get off your skin and your clothes. Today is Jerusalem Day. It's what Israelis believe is the day that their city was unified, remembering the day their city was unified back in 1967. Clashes were always to be expected. Clashes were always to be expected on today. The confluence of events means that it is extremely tense, with the worst clashes that we've seen for quite a few years in Jerusalem.
It seems, Mark, that this is a situation that could escalate.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Stephen. We were talking to one man, a Palestinian, who was in the Al-Aqsa Mosque a little bit earlier on. He says that the Israeli soldiers were there and that they provoked this, that they started attacking the protesters. Now, I can't tell you if that's right because we're not allowed into the compound area itself. What I do know is that through the course of the night, Palestinians had stockpiled rocks in the compound area because they expected that Jewish nationalists would try, around there's someone injured just coming out, that Jewish nationalists would try and access the Al-Aqsa Mosque area, which for Jews is known as Temple Mount, the holiest area for Judaism. So it's a very, very tense situation all round. I can also say that last night when we were at the Damascus Gate area... Okay, we'll move back. Okay, toda. When we were at the Damascus Gate area yesterday, there I can tell you that the police aggression was unprovoked. The Palestinians who were gathering for the end of their fast yesterday at the Damascus Gate were simply sitting quietly when the police arrived with mounted police and with the water cannon and began firing into the Damascus Gate area. That, I can tell you as an eyewitness, was unprovoked. The response was plastic water bottles thrown by some of the young Palestinians. So yeah, a very, very tense day. The British government, clearly with a complicated history here in this region, has released a statement. James Cleverly, the Foreign Office Minister, said this morning that both sides need to calm, to de-escalate, and so that Ramadan can come to an end peacefully. There are people, Stephen, talking about the prospect of a third intifada, a third Palestinian uprising. Of course, the first two were over a decade ago. Horrendous bloodshed back then. Since then, Jerusalem, Israel, Palestine has been in somewhat of a stalemate that I think has allowed the world to kind of forget the problems that are going on here. But I think that stalemate obscures a tension that never went away, and sparks like this really reignite it. I don't think we're at a stage yet where we could talk about the prospects of a third intifada, although some believe we are. But I think we're close. A very difficult situation. The politics is extremely complicated. An entirely dysfunctional Israeli government with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister for well over a decade now, trying desperately to hang on to power. And in doing so, he is trying to attract far-right Israelis, giving the far-right Israeli street, if you like, a certain legitimacy to push their settlement agenda into the West Bank. And for the Palestinians, well, they haven't had any elections since 2005 in the West Bank. Again, a politics that is, corrupt and letting the people down all the time. So we'll monitor the day, but it's just gone 9 a.m. And already I've seen scores of people injured.
OK, Mark, back to you a little bit later on. Thank you. Now, still to come for you this morning. At 7:30, I'm going to talk to the former Scottish First Minister Henry McLeish and leader of the Scottish Greens, Patrick Harvie, to hear what last week's election results mean for the future of the Union. With the UK's Cyber Security Centre revealing it took down more scams in 2020 than the previous 3 years combined, we'll be asking its chief executive just how big a part COVID-themed crime played in the surge. That's at around 8:20. And then at 8:30, I'll talk to the Telegraph's travel editor, Claire Irvin, and the founder of Trailfinders, Mike Gooley, as travel firms begin taking bookings for some summer holidays. Now, of course, it's not a sight you'd expect to see in a river running through a city, but last night a dramatic rescue operation kicked off after a baby minke whale got stuck in the Thames. It's now been set free. Anisha Sethi reports, and a warning, this does show some footage of the whale in distress.
Looks like a little whale.
It's stuck on me.
It still remains a mystery how this baby minke whale became stuck in the Thames in southwest London. But passers-by in Richmond believe they were among the first to see it trapped in the lock when they raised the alarm at 6 p.m. on Sunday evening.
We called in the Port of London Authority. Eventually we got up here, we saw him being stuck again. We called the Port of London Authority again. The guys from the lock came by to water him down. No one was allowed to touch him or anything like that, so we not able to do anything or help in any way. Now we're back just to see.
Just to check what's
we were hoping
yeah.
not to see anyone at all.
As the evening drew in, it became a combined effort to float the whale and manoeuvre it to safety. A team of water rescue firefighters and marine specialists tried to shift the mammal onto inflatable pontoon crafts, but there were several failed rescue attempts. Throughout the mission, the whale's welfare was a prime concern for the teams trying to help it to safety.
She's not, he or she, we're not sure, isn't nicely rounded like a healthy whale would be, so possibly nutritionally compromised. There's also some damage to the pectoral fins from stranding, and also the skin is showing signs that perhaps it was stranded earlier in the day somewhere as well. It's in fairly poor condition, but now it's quite comfortable. The breathing rate's nice and low.
In the early hours of Monday morning, crowds cheered as the whale was eventually moved by authorities.
The whale was taken from a non-tidal lock area to a stable area where they would then take further assessments on what is best for the whale, and moving forward in either to take it out to sea or to work on it further and the best interest for the whale itself.
Vets will now continue to assess the creature's condition to determine whether it's healthy enough to be released. Anisha Sethi, Sky News.
Well, let's talk to Emma Birchley, who's in Richmond for us this morning. What's the latest, Emma?
Well, it was in the early hours of the morning that the whale was finally moved from here, and it was put inside that inflatable flotation device. It was like an inflatable pontoon, not dissimilar to a stretcher, and the idea was that when it was towed away by the Port of London Authority patrol boat and Chiswick lifeboat, that it actually be taken downstream and then assessed further. But actually what happened is that about a mile away in the Isleworth area, the whale slipped from that inflatable flotation device and swam away into the darkness. Now, it was expected that that may well happen. So now the whale is in the river, hopefully heading, as the tide goes out, towards the sea. But the fact is, it's many, many miles from the sea. And as we know, this is a whale that was not in a good condition, that a young animal, quite underweight, also with damage to his pectoral fin. So it's now really up to the public to be able to keep their eyes out, and boats on the river to see if they can spot this whale, in the hope that it does manage to make it out to sea. But the fact is that these whales are usually found in the northern parts of the North Sea. So we're talking about the more northernmost parts of the UK. It's definitely very lost, and you know, it doesn't necessarily look good at this stage. But everyone, as I said, being urged to keep their eyes out.
OK, Emma, thank you. Well, let's have a look at some of the other headlines making the news this morning. And travel disruption is expected to continue into the week after some high-speed trains were found to have cracks in the maintenance section. The makers of the Hitachi 800 say it discovered cracks in the fleet at a very early stage. Great Western advised against travel, while LNER urged people with bookings to check before they travelled. The disruption to heart disease care caused by the pandemic could be putting lives at risk for years to come. That's a warning from the British Heart Foundation, which predicts a sharp rise in the number of people who've died from heart and circulatory diseases in 2020.
The amount of time people are waiting for procedures has really changed, from a few dozen by the end of February 2020 to 5,000 people waiting over a year for heart procedures, including surgery, at the end of February this year. That's heart surgery. Heart surgery is not a luxury. So these are really stark figures showing the disruption in care.
So David Attenborough has warned the world faces crippling problems because of climate change. The broadcaster has been given the role of people's advocate ahead of this year's COP26 summit in Glasgow, which will bring together global leaders to tackle the issue.
The problems that await us within the next 5 to 10 years are even greater. It is crucial that these meetings in Glasgow, COP26, have success, and that at last the nations will come together to solve the crippling problems that the world, the globe, now faces.
Royal Mail is trialling the use of drones to deliver COVID-19 testing kits and other health and safety equipment to the Isles of Scilly from mainland UK. If it succeeds, the technology could be rolled out across the country to support postal workers in delivering to remote areas. Now, the sound of leather hitting a willow cricket bat is a quintessential sound of British summer. But researchers say that bats made of bamboo could be the future. A study carried out by the University of Cambridge discovered the bamboo version offered a larger sweet spot than the traditional willow blade and is stronger, cheaper and more sustainable. Who knew? Now, I don't think it's going to be cricket weather today. Let's get all the details from Naz. Morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I mean, there will be a bit of wet weather around, to say the least, in the way of showers, and that means there will be interruption to play if there's any cricket being played today.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Low pressure dominates the scene for this week. So again, it's staying unsettled by the way of showers for most places today. But there's also some rather heavy rain. In fact, this morning, there are spells of rain across the eastern parts of England. There's been some heavy downpours, particularly around parts of Kent. There's been around 20 millimetres through the night. And that rain will be eventually moving its way northwards. Elsewhere, we're seeing showers across northern and western parts. Otherwise, it's actually a mainly dry and fine start to the day and a frost-free morning, the first frost-free morning in over a month since the end of March. Now, going into this afternoon, that heavy rain will be moving its way northwards across the North Sea and up towards parts of Shetland and Orkney, where it's going to be a pretty wet one there as we continue with heavy downpours across the Northern Isles of Scotland, perhaps for the far northeast of mainland Scotland. Elsewhere across the UK and Ireland, showers will become more widespread, and some of these are going to be quite heavy and thundery, may even merge into longer spells of rain at times. And with the showers, there will be some rather strong gusty winds, particularly around western exposed coasts. But as you can see, towards the end of today, for many central, southern and eastern parts of Wales and England, the showers will tend to disappear. So actually, from around mid-afternoon onwards, it's looking fine for many areas outside, but further north and west, quite blustery, with showers continuing across these areas. And temperatures around average or just a little below.
The weather. Sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thank you. Still to come on Sky News Breakfast, I'm going to talk to a former Scottish First Minister and the leader of the Scottish Greens to hear about the growing pressure on the union.
There are things we all take for granted. As the rivers and tides flow, the sun will rise, the wind will blow, and the earth will spin. But are we now spiralling into a climate crisis which cannot be avoided?
No one can predict the impact that it's going to have.
Close to the peak here.
This is really the moment of truth. Expected to be hit very hard indeed.
What can be done to reverse the spiral? The Daily Climate Show on Sky News will look for the answers.
Lots of people have discovered during lockdown they've really got onto the hobby of houseplants, and so sales of houseplants have been surging, and everyone's been sharing lots of pictures of plants on their social media and getting very excited about plants that perhaps a few years ago nobody was really that bothered about. I think it's a really serious issue that every part of horticulture needs to be engaged with. You don't need to grow houseplants in peat. I grow all my houseplants in peat-free potting mix. It's not necessary, but unfortunately, lots of the plants that we buy are still grown in peat. So it's a question of educating yourself about why peat is not a good thing to use as a medium for houseplants from an environmental point of view, and looking at the alternatives, and there are lots of alternatives. But sustainability is wider than that as well. It extends to things like learning to propagate your own houseplants so you can swap with friends, growing houseplants from seed, buying pots from charity shops rather than buying new pots, cutting down on plastic by using terracotta. So there's lots of different ways that you can make your houseplant hobby sustainable. Lots of plants have very different requirements. So a cactus is not going to be happy in the same spot as a fern. So do your research, pick your plant to suit the conditions that you've got in your house, and take care of it and observe it every day. Don't stick it on a high shelf and ignore it, because you won't notice when things start to go wrong. The main benefit of houseplants is just being able to see the greenery and nurture it, and that does bring about great mental health benefits.
Now, the head of a private hospital in India's most populous state has been charged under the National Security Act for raising the alarm about the oxygen shortage there. It's the latest attempt by authorities to clamp down on what they call black marketing, spreading rumours and spoiling the atmosphere. Well, in the latest 24-hour period, India has recorded over 403,738 new cases of coronavirus, bringing the total number of cases to nearly 22.3 million. 4,092 new deaths were recorded on Saturday. That brings the total number of deaths over the course of the pandemic to more than 242,000. Well, Maharashtra state, which includes Mumbai, has India's highest number of deaths so far, with over 75,000 recorded. Delhi is the second worst affected region, with 19,000 recorded cases. Uttar Pradesh, India's most populous state, with 200 million people, has also been badly affected, with more than 15,000 deaths. But as our special correspondent Alex Crawford reports, that number is likely an undercount.
They're fighting on several fronts in India. Fighting to save lives, but also fighting to tell it as it is. And those at this hospital in Lucknow are now facing police charges for doing just that. Every COVID patient who arrives here desperately needs oxygen, but those who sounded the alarm about oxygen shortages at this hospital are now being charged under the National Security Act and face being arrested at any moment. The head of this small hospital says 4 of his patients died in one day when oxygen ran out. He showed me the messages he put out, desperately asking for help.
सन हॉस्पिटल में 45 मरीज और ऑक्सीजन है 45 मरीज को ऑक्सीजन लगा हुआ है जो कि हमारे यहाँ ऑक्सीजन नहीं है कृपया करके अर्जेंट ऑक्सीजन देने की कृपा करें.
When he got no response, he put out a notice telling relatives they should take the patients elsewhere. A number of them did, but others had no choice. The hospital head took us to see his small oxygen store. It's again at dangerously low levels. The state's High Court has said not supplying oxygen to hospitals is a criminal act, no less than genocide.
ये 5 सिलेंडर जो हमारे पास जो 5 ऑक्सीजन सिलेंडर है ये हम 38 पेशेंट को लगभग 1.5 से 2 घंटा दे सकते हैं. तब भी हम लोग प्रेशर कम करने के लिए 3 घंटा इसको चलाएंगे कि जैसे हल्का सा प्रेशर कम करने पे 3 घंटा 3.5 घंटा चलाओ.
But the oxygen ran out by 9 o'clock that morning. The relatives of those who died say that's what killed them. If the oxygen had been there, my aunt and cousin would not have died, he told us. As we travelled through Uttar Pradesh with its huge population of 200 million, we found many ignoring COVID warnings. This is meant to be lockdown, still bustling with people and few masks. In the shadow of India's most famous monument, they appeared oblivious to the virus. Doctors we've spoken to say the mutation, which has spread to other countries, including Britain, is a far more aggressive infectious variant and affecting far younger people.
It seems that the virus is more lethal this time. It seems so, because the number of deaths have been a little higher than what we saw last time. Also, what we are observing is last year it took some time for the patient to deteriorate, but with this virus, the infectivity or the aggressiveness of the virus is so high that it hardly takes a day for the patient, otherwise fine, to desaturate and get compromised.
There's a fear about contradicting the official numbers, but this crematorium in Agra has run out of wood and is now using cow dung for its funeral pyres. Nearly 2/3 of Indians live in remote, rural areas, unable to get any help for COVID, with many dying at home and untested. The workers have no protective outfits against the virus, whilst telling us they've never been so busy. But they're reluctant to give exact figures. Why don't you just tell them, the young boy behind him says. He gets a furious response. In these areas of such deprivation, where religious sadhus are often the only people recognizing the dead, we may never know the real toll of the pandemic in India. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Uttar Pradesh.
Now, after the Scottish National Party won 64 seats, one short of an overall majority in a fourth consecutive Holyrood election, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has vowed to press ahead with plans for a second independence referendum, putting further pressure on the State of the Union. Boris Johnson says another vote would be irresponsible. Ms Sturgeon said blocking any plans would be picking a fight with the Scottish people. Well, let's talk to former First Minister Henry McLeish. Good to see you this morning. Do you agree with Nicola Sturgeon that if Westminster says no, this is picking a fight?
Well, that may not be necessary to ask that particular question, because what I'm encouraged by is that over the weekend, weekend has changed some attitude. So now we're beginning to focus on the union, because there's no doubt the SNP did remarkably well. We're heading toward 20 years in government. But Scotland is still a very divided country as far as the constitutional question is concerned. So this morning, we're talking now about what the union has to do to retain Scotland's membership of it. I think that's encouraging, and that's how the debate, I think, will pursue.
I'm slightly confused, because it's one thing to push an argument for the union to continue, but I mean, one ultimate way to settle that is the referendum question. I mean, do you not think there is a legitimacy in Nicola Sturgeon calling for that referendum again?
I think there is a legitimacy. I think there is also a legitimacy in the fact that Scots should decide. But let's step back. There isn't going to be a referendum for some time, but there will be a referendum in the future. But I think it's important to recognise that one of the reasons why independence has done so well as a policy is because it's been uncontested. The union has sat idly by, complacently by, and of course Boris Johnson has become really more of an aggravation in the whole debate than anything else. So this is an opportunity not to deny a referendum. That will happen. Of course, the pandemic, recovery, climate change will intervene before then. But on the other hand, the encouraging point this morning is that for the first time, independence may get a run for its money. That hasn't happened before, and I think it's important that when Scots make any final decision, they know what a new union could look like, a new constitutional settlement could look like, and a union which is not being bashed around by Boris Johnson, but actually is sympathetic to the ideas of four nations.
I mean, why do you think Boris Johnson is bashing it about and not giving the union a new vision?
Well, there is a view in Scotland that Boris Johnson may be popular in England, but he's certainly not a serious player in Scotland. And up to now, we've seen the single market, which has tried to hijack policies that were coming back from Europe to Scotland, now to be dealt with in London. We've seen the threat of taking Scotland to court, the Scottish Government to the Supreme Court, over the question of putting children's rights into the European Court, into our own Scottish legislation. We've seen this kind of muscular unionism from Johnson. Either he doesn't understand what he's doing, or if he does understand, it's a very dangerous path to take. So my ingredients for a debate are that he withdraws from this very hostile position in relation to Scotland. We start to talk about what a new settlement might look like to retain Scottish membership. And we also then have to recognise and respect that half of Scotland's electorate voted for the SNP. And whilst Johnson may try and delegitimise the SNP, he can't delegitimise the people of Scotland and half of the electorate. So I think since the weekend, I think we're beginning to see some light being shed on the very murky views that Westminster is taking of Scotland and Scotland's role in the Union.
And yet, I mean, yeah, murky they may be. I mean, that's up for dispute. But I mean, you're the man who said that the Scottish Parliament itself was full of hate on this issue.
Well, look, I think you've hit an important subject, not the hate issue, but the Parliament. I believe that the Parliament is in its infancy, 22 years old. What we need is a bigger, better, stronger, more ambitious Parliament. And we can get that. And that will be one of the ways for the Union to move forward. And you're absolutely right to say in this maturing process, there is still far too much hatred, especially between Labour and, of course, the SNP. We've got to grow forward as well as move forward. And I believe sincerely that the Parliament has a lot more to offer in the decades that lie ahead. But in the meantime, the Parliament should be the focus upon which all the parties in Scotland and the Scottish people can come to an agreement on what they want to do next and deliver it to Westminster. And I would like to think that Westminster will respond. But look, be in no doubt, there's a powerful voice for independence at the present time. If that is not treated carefully, then it could emerge to the point where we have a referendum, there will be a vote for Scotland to exit the Union. This is the nature of the debate. So I think we should look at the calls that are being made by some people, which are extreme. But on the other hand, there is a big, big debate, not only affecting Scotland's future, but the future of the United Kingdom.
Henry McLeish, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you. Well, let's talk to Patrick Harvie, who's the co-leader of the Scottish Green Party. Good to see you this morning. Can I ask what you make of Henry McLeish's comments? Because, I mean, clearly a unionist, clearly wanting to maintain the union, but not dismissing the idea of a referendum, far from it.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me on. I think where Henry is right, and obviously he and I would have a disagreement, is that the UK position needs not only a legal technicality to rely on, it needs political legitimacy. And that fundamentally can only flow from respecting the democratically expressed wishes of the people of Scotland. They may choose to go to court ultimately to say the Scottish Parliament may not do this and that the Scottish people may not even be allowed to be asked the question. But I think if they do that, it will lack so much political legitimacy, lack so much respect for democracy, that it will push more and more people into supporting independence. Personally, I think independence is coming. I think it's going to be achieved through a referendum in the not-too-distant future. And I think it's going to allow the people of Scotland to decide for themselves what kind of country is going to emerge from COVID, whether we're going to be the fairer, more equal and greener society that I think most of us want to be, or if we're going to be part of Boris Johnson's Brexit Britain. But that decision must lie with the people of Scotland, not with the man behind the door of number 10 Downing Street.
There's a danger, isn't there, in talking about being part of Boris Johnson's Britain. I mean, Boris, because this is about, we're talking decades in the future here. I mean, you know, this is about being part of the union as a whole. I mean, Henry McLeish saying that arguments need to be made to better establish why the union is a good thing. I mean, do you think the people of Scotland, people like yourself even, are willing to listen to those arguments if new thoughts come forward?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right that it's not all about Boris Johnson. He's in office today, and he's the one making this decision today, and I think he should respect the wishes of the people of Scotland. But he may not be in office long. He certainly won't be there forever. But, you know, Scotland can make one of two choices. It can be part of Brexit Britain, whoever's in government of the day, despite the fact that the overwhelming majority of people in Scotland voted to stay in the EU, or it can be an independent country looking to see if we can get back into the family of European nations. Those two main paths are not going to give us the same prospects for recovery, for transition away from the fossil fuel industry, and for all of the other changes that are required in our society. I believe that independence offers that better path. But what's been striking about this election campaign is that those who want Scotland to stay in the UK, those who oppose independence, have overwhelmingly focused on the process issue. Why you shouldn't have a referendum now, you know, what would be a mandate. Never mind the fact that they ignored the fact that the Conservatives never had a majority of people's votes to give them a mandate to hold the Brexit referendum in the first place. But they focus on those process questions. I don't hear any of them genuinely making a case for saying that the UK as it stands is working for Scotland and that it's the best path for Scotland, despite the fact that we have nuclear weapons in Scottish waters that we don't want. We have the Home Office conducting dawn raids against asylum seekers in Glasgow. We have a whole host of impacts from the social security system, which cause poverty and inequality. And we have huge amounts of money being spent on fossil fuel tax breaks and subsidies, propping up a lethal industry that's ripping apart our life support system. So, yeah, I think there's a huge appetite for change in Scotland, and there is a real limit on the amount of change that we can achieve if we don't take the next step from devolution to independence.
Patrick Harvie, it's good to talk to you this morning. Can I just say I fully approve of your Patrick Troughton image as well on the wall. Very nice too.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. Well, still to come on Sky News Breakfast, I'm going to be talking to Special Envoy to the World Health Organization on the risks of allowing foreign travel.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Most places will have sunny spells and showers today. Some of them will be locally heavy with the risk of thunder and hail. There will also be rain over eastern parts of England that will move northwards to Shetland and Orkney with heavy downpours. It will be breezy for many areas too, especially around coastal counties and any showers. Pollen levels will be generally high across many central, southern and eastern parts of England for today, where there will be the driest and sunniest conditions. Elsewhere, we'll have moderate levels, except across the north of Scotland, where it'll be most unsettled and their levels will be low.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Now, some international travel will resume from next Monday as the government names 12 countries that it deems safe to travel to. But as travel begins to restart, scientists are warning that new variants pose a real risk and that we are at a fearsome stage of the pandemic. Well, that particular phrase of being fearsome was used by Dr. David Nabarro, who's Special Envoy on COVID-19 for the World Health Organization. He joins us now. It's good to see you, as always. I mean, how concerned are you about international travel opening up in the way that we intend to do it in the UK?
Well, I've been impressed by the care with which, as far as I can see, the British government is trying to work out which are the safe places to go to. And secondly, I'm also pleased with the reality that people are being quite cautious, as you say, perhaps even a little bit afraid of what this virus might bring. And I think that the fear part is important, but we need to keep it in perspective. The fear is because the virus is changing, it's mutating all the time, and we know that new variants are emerging and that these are capable of being transmitted more easily. But I think at the same time, we've got to get on with life and we can't go on mothballing ourselves forever. So finding a way to restart despite this fear is what I think we all have to do. And just to therefore give you my summary, we must maintain a very vigilant posture in the coming months because there will no doubt be variants appearing. But at the same time, we have to get on with life. So in our getting on with life, we have to just be on the lookout for new spikes of disease and deal with them when they come.
Is there an issue that, I mean, obviously we've done very well with the vaccinations in the UK. Does it give perhaps a false sense of security when it comes to the new variants?
Yes, there is no security with this virus. It is constantly capable of changing, and as it changes, it has the ability, we believe, and not demonstrated so far, but it could develop the ability to be able to evade the protection that's been given to us by these wonderful vaccines. But we deal with that when it comes. And we deal with it by being on the alert and by being able to pick up new clusters of disease very, very fast, and then to deal with them also very fast. And that will be the posture for the future, being on the defensive, being able to deal with it. Whether it's a new variant or the original virus, it's the same method. Find it, make sure people are isolated, and find their contacts and isolate them. That's the basis of dealing with this particular virus.
I mean, we have a warped sense of COVID-19, don't we? When we look at a country like the UK beginning to open up, whilst on the other hand, you know, I think you're quoted as saying, you know, infections are accelerating faster than ever on a global level. Can we ever, I mean, it's a case of how do we then begin to tackle the global issue to bring about a certain level of global security on this?
Well, and that's, of course, where I concentrate virtually all my efforts, because we have a fairly unpleasant situation in South Asia at the moment, and many of you will have seen really distressing pictures, and you will have had messages from people in not just India, but neighbouring countries, and they will tell you just how difficult it is. But you know, Stephen, that acute upsurge in numbers of cases could happen anywhere. And that's what I think we're all beginning to realise. And so, on the one hand, we've got a dangerous virus. On the other hand, we must get on with life, because it just can't go on with the restrictions that people have had up till now. And finding that middle path, how to live with this virus as a constant threat, is key. I suppose that brings me back to your earlier question. If I really were able to talk to everybody personally over the coming weeks, I would say, look, yes, you must restart life, and everybody wants you to do that. But please be really careful. Maintain that physical distance of between 1 metre and 2 metres, especially indoors. And don't forget to wear your face mask, because that really can give extra protection. It's these simple things, but all done together, that will really make the difference as to whether or not future spikes are huge or future spikes are small and easily contained.
David, always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice to
Interesting
talk
at a time when all the papers are full of being able to hug next Monday. The experts saying still keep your distance where you can. Interesting advice, isn't it? OK, let's have a look at the weather for you with Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Low pressure dominates the scene. So once again, we are looking at unsettled conditions for today, sunshine and showers. Good news this morning, though. It's the first frost-free start of the day since over a month, since the end of March. And it is looking fine across many central, southern and eastern areas, although eastern parts of England are experiencing some spells of heavy rain that will move northwards up towards Shetland and Orkney later. Elsewhere, showers across the north and west becoming more widespread this afternoon, some of them heavy and thundery, but from about mid-afternoon, dry conditions for central, southern and eastern parts of Wales and England.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.